Welcome to UDL and Assessment. I am glad that you have joined me today for this presentation. And please feel free to use the chat during this time. I'm not very good at multitasking, but I'll try to keep an eye in case there is an issue with the sound or anything. But we'll be talking in the Q&A time at the end. You may have seen this iconic cartoon that shows how physical accessibility benefits students. But by not starting with the stairs and instead traveling the ramp, the building will be instantly accessible to all the students waiting outside. The cartoon tells us that as adults, we need to change our mindset, that accommodation is a way to benefit all students rather than simplified support for some students. The problem is that most curricula are designed and developed as if students were homogeneous. And the most common approach to curriculum design is to address the needs of the so-called average student. Of course, this average student is a myth and just a statistical artifact not corresponding to any individual. But because so much of the curriculum and teaching methods employed in most schools are based on the needs of this average student, they are also laden with inadvertent and necessary barriers to learning. According to the Center for Applied Special Technology, or with the acronym CAST, Universal Design for Learning Principles diverts the focus from student disability to the curriculum disability. When we eliminate barriers in the design of learning environments, it will lead to better learning outcomes of the diverse population of learners in today's classrooms. UDL addresses 3 areas of learning that deal with recognition, skills and strategies, motivation and prioritizing, or in other words, the what, how, and why of learning. The main focus of UDL is to maximize learning. We do that by taking into consideration every student's background, interests, strength, and abilities. UDL provides a blueprint for creating flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessment that accommodate learner differences. Universal does not imply a single optimal solution for everyone. Instead, it is meant to underscore the need for multiple approaches to meet the need of diverse learners. Let me give you some examples of each one of these principles. Multiple means of engagement is how do we engage students? Think about the difference it makes if you survey students about their interests and incorporate it into your instruction, or if you stated the learning goals in a relevant way to your students, something that makes sense to them in their future if they are for our College of Education relevant to the classrooms. Second principle is the multiple means of representation. Now think about how you present your lessons. How about if you provide lecture slides and a recorded video that your students can listen to on the way home, or if your textbook is also available as an ebook, so students can read it on their phones while waiting online or on the doctor's office, for example. The third principle is the multiple means of action and expression. Think about how many students will miss assignments if you provided calendars and checklists to help them track tasks. How about allowing them to show their learning through a variety of formats, such as presentations, videos, audio recording, or podcasts? While UDL and differentiation are both strategies to reach all students, there are some key differences. This is a misconception that people use UDL and differentiation interchangeably. Differentiation is a way for teachers to make a lesson more accessible to a group of students that isn't already being reached by adding options for learners. Differentiation is included in a lesson plan in the final stages of planning. UDL principles, on the other hand, are included from the very beginning of lesson planning, back at the level of identifying a learning goal. UDL principles are designed to reach all individual learners, whereas differentiation includes learners on the fringe at the end of the process. This illustration on the screen is from the University of Georgia, and it shows the difference between a ramp added when needed, and the second one, what happens when we keep adding accommodations as we need them. As you see, the building really looks ugly. And then finally, if all the accommodation were added at the design from the start, as you see the last building, it flows nicely with all the accommodations needed. What are some barriers to learning that UDL strive to eliminate? Not knowing enough background knowledge or the required skill for a lesson is a barrier. Not knowing the next steps or not receiving feedback about their progress, which can be difficult for many students, especially those who struggle with executive function or the management system of the brain that is responsible for our working memory, cognitive flexibility, and self-control. Not knowing key vocabulary terms, which can be challenging for many students, including those whose English is not their native language. Another barrier is maybe just facing social emotional challenges or feeling that a lesson isn't culturally relevant or academically interested. All those are barriers that UDL aim to eliminate. As a framework, UDL requires educators to think proactively about the needs of all learners. In consideration of the UDL critical elements, educators implementing the framework should use a background design instructional process that incorporates the following 5 steps. Number 1, establish a clear understanding of the goals or the goals of the instruction and specific learners' outcomes. Or in other words, the big ideas, what we want learner to understand, and any potential misconceptions that could be barriers to learning. And finally, ways to clearly communicate all of that to the students. Number 2, anticipating learner needs, such as the strength and the weaknesses specific to the topic of instruction, background knowledge, preference for expression and engagement, language preferences, cultural relevance, and any other curriculum barrier, physical, social, cultural, or ability level. The third step is the outcomes and assessment plan. It is about how we are going to measure learning. Have we embedded checkpoints in instruction to ensure students meet the learning goals? Have we provided multiple ways for students to demonstrate understanding? And then number 4, instructional experience. Did we use various instructional tools to introduce new knowledge? And how about engagement? Do we provide a variety of methods to engage students, such as incorporating digital tools and use self-assessment and reflection? And then the last step is for us to reflect and have that new understanding. Here we ask ourselves, did it work? Have the tools worked well? How do we might do to improve the lesson? And then before moving to the next slide, let me ask you a question. How do you define the expert learner? Think of your students and type in the chat box some characteristics you think expert learners have. Give you a minute. How do you define the expert learner, the expert student? The characteristic of your favorite students, basically. The one that you want to clone in every classroom. Provide some explanation of their thinking. Able to meet the outcomes. Have one more. Engaged, focused, critical thinking, grade ethics. Great, these are all wonderful. Generally, an expert learner is someone who is just really good at a particular skill and always has been. Educators tend to favor students who quickly learn new patterns or quickly pick up new skill. I too thought that expert learner is just a label for those students who are able to quickly demonstrate mastery of knowledge. According to UDL, expert learners are those who acquire the knowledge of how they learn. So it's completely different that we see it. They know what motivates them. They are the one who are constantly seeking to improve. Expert learners are strategic, resourceful, and motivated. And then we need to, as educators, we need to embed all of that and teach them how to learn. Not only teach them the content, but teach them how to learn. Are you ready for another question? Let me ask you now, how do you define the expert instructor? Would you type that in the chat? Now it's expert instructor. Meet students where they are. That is definitely UDL, absolutely. And move them forward. Great. Let me tell you what UDL say. The one who improves ways to each students demonstrate their understanding, knowledge. Yes, exactly. Multiple means of expressions. That's what we're talking about. Let me tell you what UDL think about expert instructor. The first step expert instructors do is to clarify the goal or the destination of the lesson. If the lesson are overpacked with goals, it can be overwhelming. So the first step is to really identify the primary goal. Second step is to reflect on the different options students have to do to achieve that goal. And then number 3, find one tool, resource, or strategy they can include in their lesson to help reduce the barriers so that students can achieve the learning goals. We will talk about so many strategies in this presentation, but and you might find it overwhelming, but just choosing one at a time will do the trick. Number 5, find ways to make the strategy available to all students from the start of the lesson, embedded in the instruction. Expert instructor asks students for feedback. For example, imagine after you model how to solve a math problem, some students struggle to remember the process for solving this kind of problem. The barrier is that the lesson requires students to process and work with a lot of information at once. To reduce the barrier, you could create a short video highlighting the key steps of the process, or you could provide a graphic organizer outlining the steps. CAS defines assessment as the process of gathering information about a learner, about a learner's performance, that is, to make educational decision. So how can we use UDL framework to design assessments regardless of whether we teach in person or online? We need to design assessments alongside the learning goals. I cannot say enough of that, so that you can ensure you are measuring the intended goals of your learning experience. We need to ask ourselves, are my learning objectives and goals clear? Does the assessment reflect and measure the intended learning goals? Or are there additional components or skills that are also being measured by my assessment? Whether we teach in a face-to-face setting or in a remote learning environment, we need to ensure that the assessment can be personally relatable and culturally relevant to our students. Here we ask ourselves, did the assessment engage the students in understanding the relevance of the content. Are there any opportunities I can provide for the students to apply new knowledge to new situations? Assessing engagement is very essential for learning as it encourages reflection. So students have the opportunity to assess their own learning. Here we need to make sure that we assess our students' engagement and look for strategies to support them. One time, after giving her students an assignment to work on in a class, a professor started to notice that many of them started to pick up their phones and started to deviate from the task at hand. So she thought quickly. She called out on a couple of student volunteers to summarize the task and the steps that they need to do. So hearing it again in their peers' language got the students back on task. Formative assessments are meant to check the student's progress toward a specific learning goal. Its purpose is to drive instruction. Formative assessment may include reflection questions on exit tickets, a portfolio collection, a quick poll. Formative assessment can be also incorporated in face-to-face and online learning. Assessment often have additional barriers. We all know that. We all know that with our assignments. Oftentimes they have barriers or challenges for learners that are not connected with measuring the intended learning goals. Where possible, we try to reduce the barrier that do not tie to the learning goals. So maybe instead of deducting points, too many points on spelling or structure, we reduce that and just let students express their ideas. For example, options such as practice assessments, review guides, flexible timing, assistive technology, or support resources can be made available for all learners. In any assessment, we can anticipate differences in how our students engage, how they are prepared, and can show what they know. Flexible options enhance access and reduce perceived distractions and ensure all learners are able to demonstrate their skills. For example, assessment should reflect the learning experience. Just as we use the UDL framework to design our lessons, the UDL principles provide multiple means of engagement, representation, and action and expression should also guide the design of our assessments. So what are some of sample strategies? Number one, Socratic seminars. They are mainly based on discussion. After reading a selected text, students formulate their own questions to discuss with their classmates. Socratic seminars encourage critical thinking and text analysis. It is student-centered as instructors act as facilitators here. In an inclusive classroom, encouraging discussion among students with various viewpoints help to build a strong learning community and drive engagement. The second strategy is video and audio recording. We use recorded lectures, e-textbook. So why not allow students to use recording and videos to express the learning? Some students are better at talking about what they know about a particular topic that they are able to write about it. Another strategy is pre-questions. Whole class discussions may be difficult for some students and could even cause anxiety. Processing what everybody is saying could be hard for some students also. When we provide students with the discussion questions beforehand, it gives them the opportunity to formulate their answers. A good tip here is to include the discussion questions in the syllabus or on the class website. Also, rubrics. We all use them. We use rubrics for assignments in a list form that shows parts of the assignments and the points of value for each part. Some students may have difficulty with time management, and may need help figuring out how much time each section will take. Have you thought of a pie chart rubric? It offers a visual for students and help them break down long assignments and plan ahead. Microsoft Excel is a good program for creating pie charts or actually any chart making apps. There are many of them out there. And then finally, using templates. Template is a strategy I use in my courses. I noticed that students have difficulty setting up format for written assignments. So I provide them with a template for the components of the paper, and all they need to do is fill out the sections. I find that strategy a lot better than just giving them a sample paper. I don't know if you've noticed, but when I gave them sample papers, they just give me copies of that sample paper with slight modification. So let's talk about sorry. Now let me talk about some assessment strategies. Giving student choices drives engagement. It is a theme that is embedded in the UDL framework. Think about, instead of assigning written assignments all the time, to provide your students with a checklist of options, each with varying point value. Your students must complete at least, let's say, 100 points worth in any combination. Group projects are a good alternative to traditional assignments. They work with project-based assignments. They would be even more effective if you let students decide the role of each person in the group. Providing assignments in the form of real-world scenarios that are directly related to careers or the workplace is another valuable way to engage students. Encouraging students to create learning journals, either on paper or digitally, or maybe by blogging. They reflect on their learning, and if you can make it interactive and comment on those reflections, the benefits would be even more. The last one is IRS questions. The term was coined by Klaus and Danaher in 2010. They suggested adding to your assignments a list of reminder questions, as the IRS reminds you to double check everything before submitting your tax return. Sample questions could be, have you checked your citation, that your citation follows the APA guideline? Did you add in-text citation? Have you checked the spelling? And these sort of questions. The guidelines of UDL advise flexible learning environment that can accommodate learning differences. We don't all think or learn the same. So why should we expect our students to all do the same to show what they know? Because of this educational mind shift, the number of apps and cross-platform software programs available to students and teachers is growing at an amazing rate. Whether your students are using Logstore to create interactive posters that replace traditional trifold, Educreations, which I use to give a voice and video to their content. Live binders, I use that one too, to collect sources online and organize them into convenient digital binders, or infographics to organize their ideas in a visual manner. There are some fantastic tools to explore. I will talk about some of them. Technology gives many opportunities to customize education to meet individual needs, whether we teach face-to-face or online. Some of the tech tools I found helpful is Microsoft OneNote. It is a note-taking application. Think of it as a digital version of a physical notebook. It has tabs, you can create pages. It allows for multi-user collaboration, and it gathers users' notes, drawings, screen clippings, and they can even add recorded comments. Notes can be shared with other OneNote users over the internet. It is part of the Microsoft Office suite. Another one is Mind Maps. It's a digital graphic organizer app. It helps students visualize ideas, make charts, and diagrams. I would like also to mention Chrome accessibility extensions. It helps students to create their ideal browsing experience, tailored to their individual's abilities and preferences. It has so many extensions that could be added to the Chrome browsers. There are many, such as zooming feature, read aloud, dark mode. There is an extension called the Mercury Reader that clears away clutter from all of the articles they read online. Some tech tools help students to evaluate information critically. The key to developing good comprehension skills is the ability to detect core concepts and to understand how the supporting details fits into a larger conceptual framework. It takes effort. For technology application, I suggest Google Forms. It is a free survey tool that is part of the G Suite for Education. It allows collecting information from users. It could be used before instruction to survey students' prior knowledge. I would also suggest online encyclopedias, such as Encyclopedia Britannica. It offers general knowledge in many formats, such as articles, biographies, videos, and images. And the short entries, okay, Tracy, 10 minutes left. The short entries in there are very give the information in short and easy to read. So understanding the core concepts would let them dive deeper into what you want them to understand later. Over here, this is a sample lesson that are provided by Vanderbilt University. When designing lesson plans, we need to look at the barriers regarding the goals, the materials, the methods, and assessment. Then design lessons that align with UDL principles. For materials, the UDL lesson includes print, video with captioning, images with audio descriptions, and, if applicable, artifacts that could be touched. The traditional lesson depends only on the print textbook. For instruction, the UDL lesson delivers instructions in a variety of ways, such as the whole group discussion, small group with teachers, small group with other students, and small group with individual activities. Traditional lessons usually include whole group discussion with independent work. Each UDL lesson will include an assessment strategy during whole and small group instruction, accompanied by corrective feedback. Traditional lessons usually assess at the end of the unit with a benchmark assessment or midterm final exams. Universal Design for Learning presents a compelling alternative to a standardized one-size-fits-all model of education. The idea is to provide tools that would amplify areas of strength and support areas of weaknesses, specifically chosen and set up for each learner. Think of the word processor and spell checker, which for a learner who had great ideas but had difficulty with handwriting and spelling could enable the writing of a coherent paper. Then again, let's think how these tools help with all of your other students. It helps us even, saved us time, and made finishing tasks less time consuming. I will end with a departing thought borrowed from Whitney Rapp, the author of the book Universal Design for Learning, 100 Ways to Teach All Learner. She says, ability and disability are socially constructed concepts. We as a society decided what makes someone able and what makes someone less able. Since we created these definitions, we can also change them. The time has come to change our definition of disability. These are some helpful resources for further reading. Design and Deliver by Lord Nelson details the process of implementing UDL from planning to instruction in an easy-to-read steps. And the Universal Design for Learning, 100 Ways of Learning, include many examples. Some of them are included in this presentation of how to apply UDL in all stages of teaching and learning. Also, I have added some websites. First, of course, is CAS.org. It has championed the field of universal design for learning in terms of development and training. The website provides online tools and sample lessons that you may find helpful. Thank you for your time. I hope you find the presentation useful and that you have an idea or two to walk away with.
All right. Thank you so much. That was so great. And we'll see if there are any questions in the chat box. By the way, perfectly paced and timed. I have to give you like total kudos for that.
Thank you. I spent some time timing myself on this.
Clearly, very good. Thank you so much. Are there any questions in the chat box? Yep, I see some comments in there.
For choices, I find in the urban learning plans, I shifted to time barriers for choices. Choices must be made quickly and then provide time. Yeah, that is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if there are no questions, I'm a librarian, so let me tell you a story. Storytelling is part of my practice. There was that story, I read it in one of the UDL books. It's about a king who gathered all of his engineers to design a road from the castle to the river. And he told them, I want the best of your designs. So all of them went out to try to do that. One of them just measured the shortest way from the castle to the river, and he built a road there. The other one looked around and he saw that there is a scenic area on the side of the river. So he built that road around that scenic route. And he thought, oh, the king might just like to stroll among the flowers and the fields. That would be the best route for him. And then the third one saw the mountains on the other side. And he said, our king is very strong and he liked to exercise. Maybe I would build a route around those mountains so he can exercise and become even stronger. So when the three of them presented their roads to the king, and they were eager to find who's the best, he told them that all of you are great, because when I am in a hurry and have a meeting, I would take the shortest route. If I am contemplating an idea, I would love to take the scenic route and just think about my ideas. If I'm feeling that I need to build strength, I would take the third one. So all of them are great. And this is the same idea of UDL. We built in many routes to learning that students can pick and choose as they see fit. It can be one at one time, it can be another one at another time. So I hope you find this interesting. Power of choice, yes, that is the main idea.